solid waste management to get as much of that recycled as possible instead of just having it go into the waste stream. At the end of the year, the amount of things that students leave behind in their residence halls, I mean, thousands of things, clothing, pillows, chairs, computers, microwave ovens, all of those things, we do not throw those things away. They are all collected and they're donated to charitable organizations. So that's another way that we have been recycling pretty aggressively. Dining, as you know, as Todd said, has been working with student groups and with our waste management department. And Lance mentioned briefly that over the past few years, we've had a project that was about 4 years long where we went into most of the parking decks, the older ones, and replaced all the lighting, and we did two things. First, we replaced it so that we had more light, but second, we replaced it all with high-pressure sodium, which uses far less electricity than standard incandescent lights and gives more brightness. So there's some of the things. I can't think, I know there's other things, but I really can't think of them now. But it's something that we are always working on. As I said, we have a dual incentive. One incentive is to be environmentally conscious, and the other is most of these things save money. They just make sense.
This is a question for Todd. Given that most of our students study late throughout the night, what is the feasibility of opening a 24-hour dining service or facility on our campus?
I'd say it's pretty good. I think I think it's very good. I think we recognize the fact that your habits are different than mine, certainly now, because I'm old and I go to bed at 9 o'clock. But I realize that many of you are up at, 2 in the morning, if not longer. So we realize that we have to address this, and I think we've got couple of good plans that I think you'll be pleased with.
Is there any kind of timeline that we can look forward to on this?
Top secret, but fall.
Let me answer this. Many of you might know that we are in the midst of rebidding of our dining contract. And I think there was one of the questions that came in had to do with that. So Todd really isn't free to say too much, but we are in the process of rebidding. We had a small core group that worked on the request for proposal, and we've been working through the State Department of Administrative Services. And our main student representative in that group has been Elliot Mork, who's president of RHA. As we get into the evaluation phase of this, we will involve more students. So I believe Sodexo has many plans of new things they want to introduce, but at this point in time, they are not totally free to talk about them. They don't want to give the competition an edge.
Top secret.
Are there any more questions from the floor? If you have any, Sebastian will walk around one more time.
Just one here. Is there any reason specific why the parking permits at Georgia Tech are 6 times more expensive than GSU? And what sets the price? And if we pay so much, why would be able to park it, have more flexibility with parking at other spots?
The price itself is based off of direct cost of the programs, which the biggest portion, well over 50%, is the bond debt on the parking structures and the lots themselves. We are not a for-profit organization, so anything that is paid into the parking system is put back into the parking system as far as maintaining those parking structures, paying for the increased utilities cost, the management of the system. I'm not for sure the GSU, Georgia State University, is that?
It's actually 3 times more.
Yeah, it's 3 times more.
It's 3 times more.
Oh, okay.
200.
I don't really know their revenue structure over there, so it's hard for me to say specifically why we're 3 times higher. I can say on both a national average and on a midtown average, we're one of the lowest ones. We've looked at it, we've benchmarked it. Like I said, I came from a university where the parking averaged about $900, and it was all based off of the cost of managing and building and maintaining that parking. Just to give you a quick example, the Klaus deck that was built was somewhere around $18,000 a parking space. So if you look at a 25-year bond on that and average it out at about 5.5%, you'll see that the 590 would have a pretty hard time paying for each one of those spaces. So it's really collectively looking at our full inventory of parking and distributing that cost back out.
Let me add something to that, too. If you look at the number of spaces that we have, over the past 8 to 10 years, it's gone like this. We had this many surface spaces versus this many deck spaces. That's now reversed. So what's happened is, for every time an academic building goes up or a green space is located on campus, a parking lot goes away. The surface parking is very cheap. You pave it, you put up lights. A parking deck costs about $15,000 a space if it's above ground. If it's below ground, it can cost 20 or 25. One of the estimates that the architects gave us for underground spaces at the undergraduate learning center, the Clough Undergraduate Learning Center, was $70,000 a space, which is just unbelievable. So if it's $15,000 a space at 5.5% interest, that comes to $725 before you've paid any principal. The other problem is that it's very relatively inexpensive to maintain a surface parking space. You basically sweep it up and the rain washes it, and that's all there is to it. A parking deck is very expensive to maintain. You have to maintain the elevators for one thing, keep them clean, but also have an elevator contract. You have all the internal stairs to keep clean. You have much higher lighting costs because every level has to be lit. Plus, you also have, if you have underground, you have to create elaborate systems to take out all the carbon monoxide and blow it out. So parking decks are really expensive. And as we continue to build buildings, if you look at the campus master plan, which we were discussing yesterday or Monday with our parking master planners, if you look at the campus master plan, over the next 5 years, we are going to lose about another, I think it was 1,200 spaces, and
Right
then
at 1,200.
another 1,500 surface spaces in the, 5 years, and then the next 5 years, we lose about 2,500 surface spaces, most of which will have to be replaced by structured parking. So you can see where this is leading. Parking lots are basically land banks for academic buildings.
The Think Big initiative is a co-sponsorship between Housing Residence Life and Undergraduate Studies out of the Provost Office. And it really is an initiative designed to create more opportunities for small groups of students to interact in significant ways with a faculty member. 2.5 years ago, when it became apparent that we were acquiring the Georgia State Village, a group of us approached the then Vice Provost for Undergraduate Studies, Andy Smith, and said, perhaps this is a time for us to look at new initiatives because we have all this new housing coming up. Those of you who are slightly younger in the audience don't remember the days when we actually had a waiting list for housing. And until the North Avenue acquisition, we had about 1,000 students every year who would want housing but wouldn't get it. And so we now had an opportunity to say, how can we serve students in a whole different way? There had been a lot of studies on campus and in the higher education world in general about the needs of second-year students. Many campuses had done things like we had with the freshman experience, had all not seen some of the problems being shifted to the second year. So we started talking about the potential of that, and it led us ultimately